Shock, the entire video series, deals with trauma, impellent force being committed towards our body and towards our partners. We have to take the utmost care in delivering and receiving shock to our bodies. Remember that you have to remain slow and incremental in your training. It should be done under the supervision of your trainer and, of course, of your own common sense. Welcome to the final edition in the Shock trilogy, Shock Engineering. The premise that we're going to be concentrating on in this edition is the ability to take his energy through diminishing our fear reactivity, take his energy and use it back against him. Now, the physiological principle that we're going to be exploring is stored elastic energy, SEE, stored elastic energy. How his action creates a simultaneous asymmetrical action in our body that stores his force within us that we're going to propel against him with our impellent force. We're going to begin with some basic exercises that we've taken from these three movement methods in shock inoculation. And we're going to start to work those together in a full body complement. The first being transferring weight and loading at the pelvis from one to the next. This should be nice and light, and it doesn't matter what the particular game is. This is just an exercise in weight transfer so that you're not moving linearly, but screwing your body and staying loose, moving one to the next. In the Ross system, this is actually part of an old dance called playing the accordion. But the basic biomechanical element in this is loading and storing energy into the largest ligament in your body, the iliofemoral. Back and forth. It's a good warm-up to keep yourself loose and move back and forth. The next is to take these movement exercises that we worked with method 1 to work on the articulation of the shoulder girdle. Over, over, so that you're taking your deltoid and bringing it full screw over top of your pectoral muscle. Back. Now you see that the first exercise and working back and forth is going to be a major component. Work on the breathing. If you haven't gone through the breathing yet, make sure you get a hold of the breathing tape because it needs to be a compressed ventilation. If you don't have that compressed ventilation, when you are struck, shock absorption is not going to be enough. You're going to have the wind knocked out of you because your organs have no room to travel. The motion is not sufficient. You need the respiratory pattern. So, once again, roll the shoulder over. Some of you at first watch this in the mirror because you're going to have the tendency to. We're not lending ourselves the suppleness in our shoulders, the plasticity that we need not only to cover and move, but to create elastic energy and propel it forward from the shoulder. So, this exercise will give us that natural elasticity into our shoulders. In a future tape on joint mobility and articulation, we'll discuss this even further, but for now, work on this basic arm screw. And don't forget that you have to load at the hips. Next, take this singular motion, the rotating of the shoulder, and add into 3 dimensions. This wave, shoulder, elbow, wrist. Shoulder, elbow, wrist. Allow this to travel so that the body, once you're comfortable with this, take it in both arms asymmetrically and work first in double figure 8s on the ground where your figure 8 is parallel to the plane of the earth. Bring it upward so that the plane is perpendicular to the angle of the earth. Remember, the root control is at the shoulder. We'll explore this in depth in a later tape. For now, the most important part is feeling where you're loading. Feeling where you're loading. And then finally, take this outward. Each time returning home with your arm, let it bring back and forth. So now you have a 3-dimensional figure 8, a helix. The propulsion is going to be both from the pelvic and from the shoulder girdle. The shoulder articulation is going to be one of the prime generators for capturing the force that you draw up from the earth each time. We're going to discuss this in depth with a partner. As we said in the beginning of shock absorption, the key to performance enhancement is energy management. One of the reasons that we began with these suppleness exercises is so that we could release the tone, the residual recruitment in our tissues. Pre-competitive and pre-fight anxiety tends to make us clench. If we clench, we're already consuming our muscular reserves. This releases that tone, releases that neuromuscular recruitment. So what we'll start with is working on these basic exercises in angles, keeping our arms loose, but not flaccid, but to give us a visual reference of 8 angles, 2, the diagonals, and the horizontal. If I can show it from this angle. The horizontals, the diagonals. If you picture yourself, and this is a good way to remember this, if you picture yourself trying to throw a punch on the ice, you'll remember to load with your body and not try and dig in. If you dig in, you're not going to have the tissue recruitment that you need for power generation. You'll be trying to impose upon him a technique. First, we, through shock absorption, diminish our fear reactivity. We'll have the wherewithal to absorb his force. Now, once it's absorbed and stored in our body, we can deposit it back upon him. We'll start first. Now, this is a good exercise to go back and work shock absorption with your partner. He's going to be breathing and absorbing each blow. Work on your 8 angles so that you're coming through and storing each motion. Stored, 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 stored. Each time. back and forth. Now you notice that these are nice and tight, but they're not clenched. They're in on the body. This is the difference between a division between a striking and grappling game and you being able to sew that gap together, which is one of the most important purposes of this tape, so that you don't see a division between striking and grappling. This all happens at once. Before we go any further with shock engineering, what we have to understand is the concept behind this. Engineering. What we're doing is not a rote imposition of force onto his body. We're going to be saturating him with all of our intention. All of the force is going to be committed towards one goal, and that is placing him down onto the ground. If you look for vital targeting, for precision, that's your technical game. You should be researching that with your particular instructor. As a video trainer, this should be composing the force, grabbing a hold of it so that you can engineer his downfall. This is the purpose. We're going to start by understanding the joint articulation. We're going to do a joint study of each portion of his body and how to look at shock engineering not as a method of dysfunction, but as a method of hyperfunction. We're going to facilitate his movement so that he goes to the ground. He won't have a choice because it's the way his body's designed to move. If I try and move his body dysfunctionally, for instance here, if I'm trying to hyperextend the elbow, he instantly resists this because his body is designed to resist dysfunction. But if I move his body the way, this elbow, the way it's designed to move, he helps because that's the way the function leads. Function. We'll start with the neck. Now, we know that stay loose. We know that it moves back and forth. We know that it moves up and down. But we can load his spine, in this case, his cervical vertebrae, by taking him up at an angle to put impellent force into his spine. Once again, study this. This is 2 dimensions. 2 dimensions, back and forth, up and down. But we can load it with energy by taking it in 3 dimensions. It's important that you work with your partner and study these slowly. If you snap your partner's neck, you're not going to have a very long training session, and you're going to be breaking your partner. So work slowly to understand how to load energy into the neck. Next, turn this way. The shoulder. We discussed this a bit when we worked on the shoulder exercises at the beginning of the tape, but notice that the humerus bone depresses and elevates. Depresses and elevates. Not only that, but we have a 135-degree range of motion in circumduction. So what we're going to do is load into a figure 8. The bone is going to come back. We're going to depress it and come forward. Elevate, depress. Elevate, depress. Elevate, and depress. Now, right now, this is a good angle before he moved. 2 feet. These are 2 points. Any 2 points form a line. He is now having a perpendicular angle. Any perpendicular angle to this stance integrity is a breach of his stance integrity. So if you have these 2 points and you intersect it at a perpendicular angle, his breach of stance integrity is at a triangle point at any line perpendicular to it. It's the way his body's designed to function. So if we load his tissues, I'll give you this angle. Load his tissues, his body wants to go in that direction. It has a preference. This is different than trying to impose a technique upon him here. His body can resist if we try and apply force to cause his body to dysfunction. But He has a preference to move towards that triangle point, and it's always changing. Look at the rotation of the joint. If he steps forward, now the perpendicular angle has changed. So the orientation is different. The shoulder towards the triangle point. Always look at it in relation to a breach of stance integrity. Next.